To the Point with Michael Williams.
Good morning. A historic win for Governor Ron DeSantis. A big announcement coming from Mar-a-Lago. A clash brewing in Florida at the center of the political storm. Lots to talk about, from local races to Tallahassee to Washington, D.C. And we'll get to the Trump-DeSantis clash. I think I was looking for the right way to describe that. We'll do that a little later. Our panel this morning, News Channel 5 political analyst Brian Crowley, outgoing Palm Beach County Commissioner from District 6, Democrat Melissa McKinlay. Thank you so much for being with us, leaving the Palm Beach County Commission because of term limits. And Michael Barnett, chairman of the Palm Beach County Republican Party. Appreciate you being with us. Let's first listen, before we have all of you give us your overview, to what the governor had to say after a nearly 20-point margin of victory over Charlie Crist. Historic win on Tuesday night. Let's listen.
People have come here because our policies work. Leadership matters. We refuse to use polls and put our finger in the wind. Leaders don't follow, they lead. We set out a vision. We executed on that vision, and we produced historic results. And the people of this state have responded in record fashion. Now, while our country flounders due to failed leadership in Washington, Florida is on the right track. I believe the survival of the American experiment requires a revival of true American principles. Florida has proved that it can be done. We offer a ray of hope that better days still lie ahead.
A speech to the Floridians, but one that had echoes that went nationwide. Brian, we'll begin with you. Your thoughts about his vision, how it propelled him to victory, including in Democratic strongholds, Palm Beach County, Miami-Dade County. Truly historic win.
You know, he has been the strongest governor in the modern history of Florida. Jeb Bush came on fairly strong, but compared to Ron DeSantis, no sir. You know, he's not afraid to use executive power. He's not afraid to push things in the direction he wants to push them in, and the voters liked it.
What's the formula that got him there? Michael Barnett, chair of the Palm Beach County Republican Party.
Well, Governor DeSantis is a strong governor, 60% turnout for the governor. I think it is historic. It is a result of not only his popularity and boldness and leadership, but also the party, the state party, the local executive committees, the grassroots and volunteers responding to him and working their hearts out to get out every single vote and make that victory, that miraculous victory on Tuesday night happen.
But many argued it was not an economic agenda per se. He's been criticized for not doing enough on the insurance crisis, things like that. We'll talk about policies that we could see in a second DeSantis administration, but more his stances on COVID, not shutting down the state, his stance on masks, his stance on culture war issues. Are those the ingredients that you think drove him the most to this victory?
A lot of it was. The COVID, the shutdowns, the lockdowns. We had massive 300,000 vote registration increase in favor of Republicans. A lot of those statewide, a lot of those Republicans came from states where people were heavily locked down. They were sick and tired of it. They wanted to move to a state and vote for a governor who respected people's freedom, kept Florida open and free.
Commissioner McKinlay?
Yeah, I'm not going to give the governor that much credit. You know, my great-grandparents moved here in 1940. My grandparents retired to Florida, over to Naples in 1978. I don't think the reason people are moving to Florida has changed. They move here because they leave states and they can buy houses down here that don't cost as much. They make money selling their homes up there. And they come here because it's a favorable tax environment, and we've helped businesses be able to relocate here by cutting the corporate tax rate. It's financial, and he was the beneficiary of that.
But the issues that he touched on throughout the last couple of years, from a Democratic perspective, they resonated, whether it was culture war issues, whether it was parental rights in schools, his, as he put it, anti-woke agenda, where woke comes to die, his position on COVID. You can't argue with the results for him that at the end of the day, those helped propel him and cement his status not only in a historic win here, but nationally as somebody that's being talked about, perhaps, we'll talk about that more later, as the new standard bearer or potentially a new standard bearer for the party.
Well, I think that's definitely going to help him on a presidential platform across the country, that he can hit on those issues. But in the same breath that we talked about on election night, where Democrats thought they were going to win on the, the Roe versus Wade agenda, that didn't happen. People came out to vote because they voted on the economy. I think that's the first and foremost reason you saw such success in the Republicans.
Brian, we talked so much the last few years about an agenda that some argue was polarizing Floridians, but you sure didn't see it in the numbers. Your thoughts? You and I've talked about this endlessly.
Well, let me also note that, and this takes nothing away from Ron DeSantis' big win, but he also had a very weak opponent. Many voters were just exhausted with the idea of Charlie Crist, who was making his third run for statewide office. He was always sort of Democrat light since he spent most of his career as a Republican. There was a distinct lack of enthusiasm for Charlie Crist, and that helped Ron DeSantis enormously. I'm not saying he wouldn't have won, but it might have been by a smaller margin had he had a more serious opponent.
Let's speak to issues. Florida legislative leaders are already saying they'll discuss further restrictions on abortions. What is the sense of what happens in Tallahassee, Michael, now? We're already hearing about that push right now. It's already at 15 weeks. Some arguing to take restrictions on abortions, that after 12 weeks, no abortions in Florida. And there's even some talk among some to outlaw abortion altogether. We've heard those kinds of discussions. It'd be interesting to see what happens. Let's begin with you.
I'm not a policy person, but I don't think it takes a policy person to realize the governor has the momentum, the mandate. Again, 60% of the people love his policies, love the way he's governing, and he is a pro-life Republican. He is a pro-life governor. I can see him pushing for much tighter restrictions on abortion, if not an outright ban. I think it's at 15 weeks now, maybe 12 weeks, maybe 0 weeks.
But, Brian, this is somebody who now has to be, we know he's at least looking very hard, at a national stage. He's been, for him, relatively quiet. He's talked about his views as strongly pro-life. But as you're calculating and doing the political calculus about a possible national run, what do you think?
Well, one thing that doesn't get talked about very much with Ron DeSantis is apparently he's a very devout Catholic,
yes,
as is the First Lady. And
Casey DeSantis.
Casey DeSantis. And if, because of their religious beliefs, they believe that abortion should be restricted more, they're coming at it from not necessarily a political point of view. On the other hand, if you're going to run for national office and you have to run in all 50 states, you got to be careful.
Commissioner?
Hey, I'm born and raised Catholic myself, and it's not a decision I would have made, but I don't believe in taking that decision away from other people. And we talk about freedom in the state of Florida. While that argument, that issue didn't work in Florida, it resonated across the nation, and it helped keep, I think, the Senate in the Democrats' hands up in Washington. What you're going to end up doing, I think, is motivating a group of people to put a constitutional initiative on the ballot in Florida on that issue alone. Speaking of what's happening in Washington, Florida is such a part of the national picture. You can't talk about the Florida picture without the national. Let's at least throw up the House races here. There was a story in the New York Times said, New York Times says Republicans might have held a shot at the House, or might not have any shot at the House, that's still up in the air, if it was not for, their quote, a brutal Republican gerrymander in Florida. They also noted ruefully, and a gerrymander by Democrats in New York that did not work. So it depends who's doing the gerrymander. But let's at least look what happened here. Brian Mast, the incumbent Republican in the newly minted District 21, a decisive winner, of course, as we move along here. And really no big surprises. Lois Frankel, the Democrat, besting Dan Francisi. And as we move on, let's move down the list here real quickly, if we may. A newly minted in the one open seat we had in District 23 covering Southern Palm Beach County, Northern Broward, the Democrat, Jared Moskowitz, the winner. And in District 20, also covering parts of Palm Beach County and Broward. You see the numbers for yourself. Sheila Sherfless McCormick rolling to victory. So even there, if Republicans hold the House, and right now they seem to have the inside track, but it's tenuous, in part it's because of what happened where? In Florida. Michael?
Absolutely. We saw Joe Budd had a 5-point difference between himself and Moskowitz. He won the Palm Beach County
a strong
portion.
Democratic lean district too.
Exactly. However, South Palm Beach County is now a Republican red. He
right,
won
that's
the
my
Palm
point.
Beach County.
He did better than would have been expected and what had always been considered a
and
strong
so did Dan
Democratic
Francis.
lean. Yeah.
Dan Francis also cut his margin to about 9 points behind Frankel, which was 11 points better than Laura Loomer did 2 years ago because of Governor DeSantis, who has led as a bold governor. That's why I think, going back to the abortion issue, he's not going to be afraid to go ahead and push more restrictive rules on abortion. And you're assuming, I think, prematurely that he's going to run for president. I know we're going to get to that discussion soon, but he has not made that clear whatsoever. I'm going to be at the announcement at Mar-a-Lago on Tuesday, and hoping to see what President Trump has to say, hoping that he'll be the one to announce.
Well, he may well, but he will be doing it against a recent drumbeat from conservative writers that have a different take, but we're going to talk about that in our next block. As we end our first segment, though, we talk a lot about Democrats and Republicans at loggerheads, but I would like to note as we close out with our outgoing commissioner, Melissa McKinlay, term limited in District 6, Palm Beach County's biggest district. Sarah Baxter, the Republican, wins, and Republicans and Democrats can't get along. Tell us the story of what you've been doing the last few days.
Well, you know, I think we saw in the last presidential election the whole argument about not having a smooth transition of power, and I don't believe in that. I mean, I do believe in a smooth transition of power. It's more important that my constituents are well served and not play politics. So Sarah and I actually met on Friday. We spent a few hours driving through the Glades talking about projects that the county has been working on, and I look forward to helping her transition into her new position.
And laudable, Brian, because we talk so much about polarization. We need to take time to say a lot of people can talk. You and Michael Barnett sat here. We had viewers calling in and said they got along well. Yeah, that's what happens when you sit and talk about differences but agree to disagree and move along.
Yeah, and that's a good message for the county commission as a whole, which I believe is 4-3 now, 4 Democrats, 3 Republicans. You know, but when it comes to the issues that affect the residents of Palm Beach County, sometimes you just have to set the politics aside and try to do what's best for the residents. And that's a good message that came out, where the Democrat and the Republican get together and discuss what's best for the county.
We'll talk about the future for Republican Party and Democratic Party here. That all ties into what may or may not happen in Mar-a-Lago. Since Michael teased it, we'll cover it. Still to come, the run for the White House. Former President Trump expected to announce on Tuesday, and how he's already going after potential opponent, Governor Ron DeSantis. Former President Donald Trump versus Governor Ron DeSantis, the possible clash for the Republican nomination. Our roundtable takes that up next.